heart of Waco, Texas, where church bells echoed through quiet Sunday mornings and everyone knew their neighbor's name, Matt and Kari Baker stood as a symbol of faith and love. Matt, the local youth pastor, was the kind of man people trusted instantly. Warm smile, confident words, and a charm that made him a natural leader in the church community. Parents wanted their kids to look up to him. He organized retreats, led worship nights, and counseled troubled teens like a man who carried the answers to life's hardest questions. And beside him, always smiling, was Kari, a woman whose presence radiated calm. Her kindness wasn't just a mask for the church, it was who she truly was. People often said she had the kind of soul that made others believe in goodness again. The Bakers seemed untouchable, the kind of couple small towns put on a pedestal. Their love story was the stuff of Sunday sermons, a pastor and his devoted wife working hand in hand to guide others toward God. Together, they raised 2 daughters and built a life that looked picture perfect from the outside. When tragedy struck years earlier, the sudden death of their youngest child, the community watched as Kari clung to faith while Matt preached about overcoming grief through God's plan. It was heartbreaking, yes, but also inspirational. People saw them as survivors. But beneath that public image, the cracks were already forming, cracks no one wanted to see. Kari had begun noticing changes in her husband, subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. The man who once prayed with her before bed now spent late nights away, often counseling female church members or working on youth programs. His words grew distant, his affection colder. Friends would later say Kari had confided in them, saying she felt something off, but she brushed it away with nervous laughter. After all, how could a man who spent his life preaching about forgiveness and grace ever be capable of harm? In a town built on faith and reputation, it was unthinkable. Yet, as the days passed, that sense of unease in Kari's heart only grew stronger, like a quiet storm no one else could hear. It was a warm April night in 2006, the kind of night when crickets hummed outside and the Texas wind carried the smell of rain. Inside the Bakers' modest home, everything seemed calm, almost too calm. Around 10 p.m., Matt Baker claimed he checked on his wife, who had gone to bed early. He later told police she'd been quiet lately, struggling emotionally, and had taken some sleeping pills to rest. But a few hours later, his frantic call to 911 shattered the silence. The dispatcher's tape captured his trembling voice, "My wife. She's not breathing. Please, send help." When paramedics arrived, they found Kari lifeless, lying neatly on the bed in her pajamas, her hair brushed, her Bible resting beside her, and an empty bottle of sleeping pills on the nightstand. On a nearby table sat a handwritten note, shaky but short. It read like a suicide letter. As the first responders worked, Matt stood nearby, weeping and clutching his chest, saying over and over that she had been depressed since the death of their daughter Cassidy. He told them she'd never been the same, that he'd tried to help her, but faith couldn't fix her pain. His story sounded believable. After all, everyone in Waco knew about the heartbreak that family had endured. The police, moved by his grief and reputation as a respected pastor, saw no reason to doubt him. The medical examiner labeled the death a suicide caused by a sleeping pill overdose. Within a day, Kari's body was released, and Matt began planning her funeral. A service that drew hundreds of mourners from the church, all praying for the grieving husband who seemed too broken to speak. But not everyone bought into that story. In the days following Kari's death, her mother, Linda Doolin, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Kari had spoken to her on the phone just 2 nights before, cheerful and full of plans. She'd even mentioned wanting to redecorate her daughter's room. Suicide didn't fit the woman Linda knew. And then there were the small things, the strangely calm way Matt spoke at the funeral, the speed with which he removed Kari's belongings, the odd, hollow tone in his condolences. Behind the pastor's trembling hands and watery eyes, there was something cold, something almost rehearsed. It was as if Matt Baker knew no one would ever question him, and for a while, he was right. In the months following Kari's death, while the rest of Waco tried to move on, her mother Linda Doolin couldn't sleep. Something deep inside her told her that her daughter didn't take her own life, not Kari. She replayed every phone call, every laugh, every conversation they'd had in the weeks leading up to that night. Kari had been talking about the future, about her faith, about forgiving herself for not being able to save their late daughter, Cassidy. Nothing about her sounded hopeless. Linda started gathering whatever she could, text messages, voicemails, notes Kari had left behind, anything that might give her a clearer picture. The more she looked, the more she realized how little sense Matt's story made. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was determination. She wanted answers. At first, no one in authority would listen. Police insisted there was no sign of foul play. The church closed ranks, standing firmly behind Pastor Baker. Friends told Linda to let it go, to find peace in God's plan. But Linda wasn't the kind of woman who gave up easily. She began digging into Matt's past, quietly talking to members of the congregation, women from youth retreats, even his former co-workers. What she uncovered made her blood run cold. Whispers of inappropriate messages, private counseling sessions that went late into the night, and women who claimed Matt crossed lines he shouldn't have. One woman even admitted that she had been having an affair with Matt before Kari's death. That revelation hit Linda like a storm. Suddenly, her instincts felt justified. Kari hadn't been a broken woman. She had been betrayed. But even with these discoveries, there wasn't enough hard evidence to reopen the case. Matt Baker had moved on with his life, remarried another woman from the church, switched congregations, and continued preaching about faith and forgiveness as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Linda and her family became pariahs, treated like troublemakers for daring to question a pastor. Still, Linda pressed on. She started documenting everything: timelines, witness statements, photographs, even copies of Kari's medical reports. She told herself, if the police won't find justice, I will. And somewhere in that long, exhausting search, she found something she hadn't noticed before, a clue so small, so ordinary, that at first, she almost overlooked it. Kari's Bible, still tucked away in a box from her old bedroom. It was a rainy afternoon when Linda finally opened the box that had been sitting in her attic for nearly 2 years. A box filled with Kari's belongings from the night she died. Inside were small pieces of her daughter's life, a wedding photo, a candle from the church, a few letters, and her Bible, the same one police had found beside her bed that night. Its edges were worn, pages creased, and inside were tiny notes in Kari's delicate handwriting. At first, it just looked like verses she'd underlined or messages of faith she'd written to herself. But as Linda flipped through the pages, she noticed something strange. Certain passages were marked with sticky notes, highlighting verses about trust, betrayal, and fear. And then, tucked deep between the book of Psalms and Proverbs, she found something that stopped her cold: a folded piece of paper, dated just days before Kari's death. The letter was short, written in hurried, shaky handwriting, and it wasn't a suicide note. It read more like a warning, a desperate cry from someone who knew she was in danger. Kari wrote that she'd been feeling uneasy around Matt, that he was pressuring her to take pills to help her sleep. She mentioned feeling trapped, unsure if she could trust the man she shared her bed with. One line stood out more than the rest. If anything happens to me, please tell Mom I love her, and that this wasn't what I wanted. Linda felt her hands tremble as she read the words over and over again. This wasn't depression. This wasn't hopelessness. This was fear. For the first time, she had something real, something that could finally prove what her heart had been screaming all along. Kari didn't choose this. Someone chose it for her. When Linda turned that note over to investigators, the entire tone of the case shifted. Detectives began re-examining the original evidence: the suicide note, the pill bottles, the toxicology report. For the first time, they noticed inconsistencies. The note found at the scene didn't fully match Kari's handwriting. The dosage of sleeping pills in her system didn't align with the supposed suicide amount. And most chilling of all, Matt's fingerprints were on everything. The Bible, the bottles, the note. It was as if he had staged the perfect scene and expected no one to ever question it. But that single folded letter hidden between the pages of faith had torn his plan apart. The Bible that was supposed to make her death look peaceful had become the key to exposing the monster behind the pulpit. Once detectives reopened the case, the image of Pastor Matt Baker as a grieving husband began to crumble piece by piece. Investigators re-interviewed former church members, colleagues, and women who once trusted him as a man of faith. What surfaced painted a disturbing portrait: a manipulative man who used charm and scripture to control people, especially women. One by one, women came forward with stories that mirrored each other. Matt had pursued them emotionally, spiritually, and physically under the guise of counseling. He preyed on vulnerability, offering comfort while weaving himself into their personal lives. And in the middle of all these confessions, one witness revealed something explosive. The night before Kari's death, Matt had asked her if she knew how much sleeping pills could hurt someone. That chilling question suddenly became the missing puzzle piece investigators had been waiting for. The forensic team went back over everything: the pill bottles, the handwriting samples, the toxicology results. And this time, they weren't looking through the eyes of grief. They were looking for evidence of deceit. What they found was undeniable. The prescription for the sleeping pills had been filled by Matt himself under a false pretense, claiming they were for his wife's stress. The dosage levels in Kari's body showed she couldn't have swallowed the pills voluntarily. There were no traces of the pills, bitter coating in her throat or stomach lining, suggesting they were likely forced or disguised in a drink. Even the suicide note, once taken as proof of her despair, was revealed to be a forgery. Experts concluded that the handwriting was inconsistent with Kari's own, particularly in words like love and sorry, words Matt had apparently mimicked poorly. Every piece of evidence that once supported his innocence was now turning into a weapon against him. When the case finally went to trial in 2010, the courtroom was packed. The same congregation that once called him Brother Matt now sat in stunned silence as prosecutors laid bare the dark truth behind the pastor's facade. They presented the Bible note, the affair testimonies, the falsified prescription records, and the damning forensic evidence. The jury listened as Linda Doolin, Kari's mother, took the stand and read her daughter's words aloud, the hidden note from the Bible that started it all. The courtroom fell silent. Even Matt Baker's expression cracked for the first time. He no longer looked like a man of God. He looked like a man cornered by the truth. When the verdict finally came, the words echoed like thunder through the room: guilty. The same pastor who preached about forgiveness had taken a life and thought he could bury it beneath faith and reputation. But in the end, it was Kari's faith, written in her own trembling hand, that brought his lies crashing down. Justice came slowly, but it came with a weight that could be felt across the small town of Waco. For years, Matt Baker had stood behind a pulpit, preaching about grace, honesty, and redemption, words that now rang hollow against the truth that had finally surfaced. He thought he could outsmart everyone: the police, the church, even God himself. But what he didn't realize was that faith leaves a trail, and Kari's faith had left one written in her own hand. That single note hidden in her Bible, fragile, trembling, almost forgotten, became the voice that refused to be silenced. It spoke louder than his sermons, stronger than his lies, and it reached beyond her grave to reveal the monster hiding behind a man of God. The very symbol he used to disguise his sin became the evidence that unmasked him. In the end, Kari's Bible didn't just hold scripture. It held the truth. And maybe that's what's most haunting of all, because sometimes, even when evil tries to hide behind faith, the truth finds its way through the pages. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.